thank you for joining us. To our guests, our board members are kind of locked into this a little bit, but we appreciate everybody's presence tonight. It feels a little more formal than we're used to here. At the same time, we did want to bring our presentation into the boardroom this year instead of in one of our surrounding buildings. Thinking some folks may wish to stay for our 7 o'clock board meeting, but of course there's no expectation that you do. We actually have 2 presentations rolled into one this evening. It's both our state of the district presentation as well as our budget presentation, inviting our community members, our board members to get a snapshot of where we are today as well as where we are looking to go for the future. When I begin my presentations throughout the district, be it with the staff, be it with board members or community members, I like to start us out with our traditional beginning. Guys, for me to say we are and you respond?
YS.
So one more time, we are?
YS.
And when we do our presentations, we try to keep that in mind, and we ask ourselves, what does it mean to be YS? And being YS means a whole lot of things, and you're going to see that embedded throughout this evening's presentation. When we look at our 2 presentations this evening, again wrapped into one, we have 3 goals tonight, and that is to provide the annual update on the district. And I say the annual intentionally because each year we are asked to provide this update so that the community has a sense of where we are as a district. The staff will have the opportunity to see the same presentation, our administrative team, and certainly the board. We're outlining the direction of the district. Where are we going from here? No matter where we are, if we're not looking ahead at all times, it matters little where we are. So we always have to have that forward-thinking process. And finally, to provide an overview of the financial means to support this direction, to support where we are headed. And so you'll see that 3rd goal embedded primarily in the second portion of the presentation. I go back to the we are YS, and who are we as YS? And one of the pieces that we can't ever lose sight of is our mission statement. And that mission statement should drive everything that we do. Any of the slides tonight, you should be able to bring back to this mission statement and to say the priorities of the district, the accomplishments of the district that which we are so proud. Does that help us to educate, challenge, and prepare our students? Will our students be prepared to shape the future? And that's the driving force. So when I say we are YS, it embodies that mission statement. I am proud as the superintendent to stand before you this evening and say that the state of the York Suburban School District is strong. This is the 3rd opportunity that I have had to present a state of the district address, and each year I've used that same word. The state of the district is strong. I inherited a strong district. I believe that we as a board, as a community, as a group of employees, have continued to support the strength of that district, and I believe that we remain a very strong district. And I can show you some evidence of that tonight, and I can speak to the direction that we will be moving forward to ensure that we remain strong. In order to do that, I've broken the district down really into 6 facets. And what I'd like to do, if we can frame it from the larger picture, is look at our accomplishments and then look at where we're going from here in each of those areas. Our accomplishments, rather than just looking at the year behind, I've taken a broader view this year than I have typically, because now's the time for us to sit back and we can say, okay, over the course of the last 3 years, what have been the big focus areas of the district and the accomplishments? And certainly high achievement. If we go back to that mission statement, high achievement has to be one of those areas that we're focused on constantly. And have we accomplished that? Certainly. And there's a number of measures to outline that. We have had national recognition, we've had state recognition, and you see that lower in our bullets. I'm not going to read each bullet to you, but with that recognition, we've had a National Blue Ribbon High School, we've had a Title I building, we have had outstanding PSSA results from 3rd through 8th grade. We've had outstanding Keystone results, but then it plays into PSAT and SAT results. And so when we look at the accomplishments in the academic arena, there is a lot of evidence to support the idea that we have and we continue to produce high-achieving students. Through that process, however, we've met a number of other challenges, one of the largest of which was to transition to the core, and that's a curricular transition that impacted us at all grade levels, and I can say that the impact of that could be felt as low as our kindergarten and straight through 12th grade. So the transition to core was a huge challenge that we met, and it's an accomplishment of which we should be very proud. We've embedded an early learning program in all of our elementary schools. That's a partnership with Bright Horizons to bring preschool and extended daycare and even a summer program into the district in all 4 of our elementary buildings. We've expanded the open campus at the high school, and we've just gotten approval for the full-day kindergarten to be implemented in the fall of 2017. And down at the bottom, you'll note we put in remediation programs, and we'll speak to them a little bit later as well. And we have been able to move to a one-to-one computer partnership for students in grades 3 through 12. We also can expand that and speak to essentially a one-to-one in our primary schools, although it looks a little bit differently than our 3 through 12. And you remember we were going to speak to accomplishments in 6 different facets. The first was academics. Now we're going to move to our students, our most important commodity here. And we can speak to the nurturing environment in which we believe that our students are educated. We have lots of evidence to that effect. When we think about the accomplishments of our students, I think the most glaring accomplishment we can look at is every single year, used to be June, but really is now May, we see 200 plus students walk across the stage with graduation. Our graduation rate is very high. We're very proud of that. Every time a student graduates, that's the hallmark of the success of our students. At the same time, there are lots of benchmarks along the way. And the closest one to graduation is when we look at the students and what they do after high school. The number of students moving into successful situations, be that 2 or 4 year school, be that the military, be that directly into employment. Our students are moving into successful situations because they are prepared, back to our mission statement, to shape the future. So that while we have graduation as a key benchmark, along the way, as early as kindergarten and straight up through 12th grade, we can look at the kinds of achievements our students earn, be it in the arts, be it in athletics, or in the classroom with scholastic rewards. Not just the top-notch students receiving the high awards that we see in the newspaper, but we see student growth along the way amidst our whole student population. But just as important to that end is the citizenship that our students learn. Our kindergarten students learning how to play well with one another. Our kindergarten and first grade students learning how to sit properly on a bus. Our students learning how to interact with one another despite racial differences, despite religious differences, and those sorts of things, K to 12. Students learning how to respect the community in which they live and how to engage with that. That all feeds the citizenship growth that we see in our students. And I mentioned the growth of our student population as an accomplishment because we've done all these things. We continue to provide this despite the fact that we have a growing student population over the last number of years, and the fact that we have maintained our excellence with this growth in student population speaks to an accomplishment. A third facet that we want to focus on is our personnel. And in that 3-year period, I think it is an accomplishment to transition to a new superintendent. A new superintendent changes the dynamics in the district, no matter who that superintendent is. Without evaluative comments, because that would be a little selfish, without evaluative comments, the district has successfully made that transition. That doesn't always happen when there is that transition in that CEO position. In addition to that transition, 35% of our administrative positions have changed. And that starts with the assistant superintendent. The assistant superintendent's role has changed from before. We used to have 2. We now have 1. That changed her role. We used to have that second assistant superintendent. We moved a different person into that to a director of educational services. So right there in our 3 top positions, there's been 3 transitions. We had a new person already in the Director of Finance, so that position is not counted as being transitioned in these 3 years. But then if we look at the building level, we've had a transition of leadership at the high school. We've had 2 at the middle school. We've had 1 at East York. And so with all of those transitions in an administrative team, the district has continued to maintain its focus on our mission and been successful to that end. We've added teaching positions. Built into the budget this year is the addition of 5 more. From 2009, there was a loss of 26 professional positions. Despite the fact that we were increasing our enrollment during that window of time, we were losing professional positions. And the reason for that was the economy and the financial situation around the state and in the community, and the district wisely chose to look at positions to reduce those costs rather than impose even greater burden on our taxpayers. But we are now at a place where we can bring some of those positions back. And so we're adding teaching positions. We're also seeing retirements and other transitions, but in a 3-year period, we've had a 15% turnover. 15% of our teaching positions have turned over. And that's a significant number to look at to say that means reorientation, re-education. It means bringing those folks into the mission of the district. Then we look at support staff and note a 70% turnover. That's a significant transition each year and requires a great deal of effort on the part of the staff to ensure that those folks new to the district become embedded in the culture of the district. I spoke earlier about the Early Learning Initiative, the professional development, and we also have a partnership with Millersville University for a professional development program that brings more student teachers into the district for a longer period of time, and they are able to serve our students in a much more supportive role than has been the traditional student teaching component. Also, under the accomplishments in regards to personnel, we've settled 4 significant contracts, and that's with our teaching staff, it's with our support staff, the assistant superintendent, and the director of finance. Challenges that we have overcome, and that's why it's on the accomplishments page. We have had some tricky personnel situations with regard to discipline, some unexpected retirements, and resignations. And to that end, the district, the board has been involved to some extent in that, have risen to the challenge, and we can successfully chalk that up to some accomplishment. Excuse me. When we look at the next facet, we look at our facilities. And while this list looks short with just 3 bullets, if we look at that first one and look at the scope of the projects, we've enhanced our facilities significantly in the last 3 years. And you'll recall prior to those 3 years, we had something of a bit of, although not formally called such, but a moratorium on these big projects because of the financial situation. 3 years ago, we came back to that and began addressing our facilities in a much larger, much more focused way. We now have secure entrances at all of our school buildings. We have a new middle school cafeteria. Our office spaces in most of our buildings have been refurbished, new turf, and new auxiliary gym, just to name a few. We can certainly get into the less obvious kinds of things like roofs and carpet and those sorts of things. They're not necessarily as readily apparent to the community, but just as important. We've built a preventative maintenance plan with a schedule to ensure that, despite the fact that we have some older facilities, that we are able to ensure that we maintain them appropriately. And the third bullet we have here is the capital projects plan. And there's always been a capital projects plan, but we've really nailed that down to a very specific, concrete plan that gives us guidance and direction for how we maintain our facilities over time. The next facet is that of finance. We do indeed have a strong fund balance. The board very purposefully grew that fund balance. Despite the growing student population and the reduction in our state contributions, we have been able to stay within the index each year with regard to our tax increases. While that's not a goal, our goal is really to reduce that every year. least we have been able to stay within the index without tapping into the fund balance inappropriately, as we've watched many of our neighboring districts be forced to do, where they've had to spend down their fund balance for operating costs. We've reduced our charter school enrollment very purposefully. We attacked that to help us in our financial realm. We've transitioned to Skyward, our operating system. We've begun to tackle the issue of healthcare costs very specifically, negotiated that into the last contract with the personnel to begin to tackle that. And perhaps some of the trickiest aspects of what we've done over the last 3 years is manage the complexities that the state brings forward for us when we're never sure if and when we're going to have a budget or the monies from the state to spend. And finally, in a more general overview, the district as a whole, some other accomplishments that of which we should be very, very proud. The board leadership, we've had in the last 3 years 2 different presidents new in that role to the board. We've transitioned 33%. 3 of our 9 members were new in that period. We've created, as a result of that, we've created a fairly intensive orientation process for the board members and a manual to which board members can refer. We've strengthened the committee structure of the board, focusing more on committee work that doesn't need to be repeated out at every formal board meeting. Revised the entire policy manual in that 3-year period, a yeoman's task, and one for which the board should be applauded. Strengthened community partnerships, developed a brand new one, and while that was the work of the administration, I look at that because of its impact on the district as a whole, and the district has been able to bring back midday transportation, and that's been a very big help, and it's also supported our ability to bring students back from charter school and to prevent them from going to charter school. So with those accomplishments, in each of those realms of the district, I think there's supportive evidence here to suggest that the state of the York Suburban School District is strong. So we build on the strength of that foundation. That foundation has been strong for many years at York Suburban. It's our responsibility to always be looking forward and say, how do we build upon the strength of that foundation? How do we grow? Where are we going from here? And what challenges will we face in order to get there? And so in these next areas, I'm going to go back to those same components. I'm going to go back to academics and students and finances and personnel and facilities and break that down into 2 areas. Our focus areas over the next 3 years, not just this year, but our focus over the next 3 years, as well as the challenges that we face. And so, again, starting with academics, you've heard this before, individual student needs. Individual student needs. While I keep addressing the fact that we have had growth in our student population, we're still small enough that we can focus on every individual. And that's a challenge for us, but it's important that we do that. And so we continue to focus administratively and with our teaching staff to look at every individual student need. How do we engage all of those students? For the past 3 years, we've seen a real focus on primary. You heard that in my State of the District address 3 years ago, that we wanted to focus on our primary and build on that as a strength. Well, guess what? This is the first of perhaps 3 years where you're going to hear from me, where we're going to focus now more on the intermediate and middle schools and ensure that we have all the services and ensure that those buildings and the students therein shore that up. And so primary, we've done a terrific job with that focus, and now we'll shift that up. We're looking, with the engagement and meeting individual student needs, we're looking at how to ensure that we have inquiry and project-based learning and how we grow that through a more relevant curriculum. That's an ongoing process, and you should see that built into everything we do over the years, but even more so now. We do have particular focus on special ed. We didn't go into the school year planning for that, but because of some personnel circumstances, we are now looking at a special ed vision and how to ensure that vision gets put into place and implemented fully over the course of the next few years. But with that, we're also looking at 2 things. One is bringing back some of our special ed students and programs for the district to manage as opposed to relying on the IU for all of that, with a particular focus on perhaps bringing it back, beginning with our primary level in emotional support. I think that didn't come out right. Emotional support. I think it came out as sport. And so we're looking at that actually in the near future. We have a very successful emotional support program in grades 3 through 12 in the district. And at the time that was implemented, we didn't have the student population that needed ES at the primary level. Those numbers have increased dramatically, so we're looking at the feasibility of that. And we'll always have an eye on that next generation technology. Our challenge to meet the academic needs of our students, of course, is that our students are coming to school needier and needier all the time, and you folks are hearing that from me and others on a very regular basis. Second facet to focus on is our students again. Again, you're going to hear that engagement theme throughout. You've heard it through the course of this year. That's not a 1 year. It's not a one shot and done. Okay, we fixed engagement. It's something we will continue to work on over a period of 3 years, looking for academic supports to ensure that all students are engaged. And that focus on all students. Many, or most of our students are engaged without lots of academic supports. But in order to capture all of our students and get them all engaged, we need to ensure that we have academic supports for them. Developing cultural awareness as we become a more diverse school. Provision of mental health services. We're seeing more and more of our students needing support to that end, and what does that look like? Is that a strengthening of our school counseling program to make sure referrals are in place, or does that include other kinds of things? And residency is an area of focus. We have noted that residency is a consistent concern for the district, as we have many students, many families use district addresses that aren't necessarily legit, and that we have to make sure that the students who are being educated by our taxpayers are in fact residing within the district. So the challenges in order to meet these focus areas are really about two things: our student needs, and you saw that challenge in the academic area, as well as non-residents. That's a slippery slope. It's a difficult thing to manage, and there are two biggest challenges to meet the needs of our students. The third aspect, again, coming back to personnel, we have immediate focus areas. The superintendent's contract, I list that first, not because it's most important, but because it's next up on the docket in the area of personnel. The teacher and the YSEA is the teacher contract, and the YSESPA is our support staff contract. Those two contracts expire a year and a half from now. So in terms of sequence, we have those three contracts over the next year and a half. Then we're good for a little bit before we have to come back and recapture the director of finance and the assistant superintendent. What else in these 3 years? Leadership transitions. Certainly looking at, with losing the director of ed services to retirement, looking at that leadership transition with that role, myself and the assistant superintendent, but also anticipating that we will have other retirements administratively due to folks hitting that age. We have job descriptions. That's a more immediate concern. That should be cleaned up this year, at least this calendar year, if not this school year. And a healthcare task force to continue to look at that ever-pressing healthcare issue. So what are our challenges? Well, the reality is we have a teacher shortage we're facing. And while numbers may be there, quality isn't always commensurate with numbers. Numbers are not there in many cases. We anticipate needing at least one math teacher for the coming school year, and we know that math teachers at the secondary level are very difficult to find. Quality math teachers are even more difficult to find, and so that will impact us in the area of personnel, as will the finances, particularly in settling contracts and addressing healthcare costs as they continue to rise. In the area of facilities, we have a feasibility study that was complete, and now we need to implement it. We anticipate a leadership transition there. That's no secret that Mr. Gerling is not a long-termer. And what will that look like? And when you lose a 40-year employee, you've got to focus and you've got to plan ahead. We have some immediate projects, our high school roof, doors at the high school, and you say, what's the big deal? Well, think about how many doors there are in a single high school building. Our stadium, with some renovations out in the stadium, and to ensure that we have a safe situation for all students. And what challenges are we facing in the area of facilities? Our facilities are old. When we look at the age of our buildings, we have to have concern, and we have to have a clear plan to address them. When the boiler goes, what does that look like for us? Because when a boiler breaks, are the parts there to repair it for some of the facilities that are aged? And so that's just one example of the kinds of things we face every day with our aging facilities. We have the preventative maintenance plan in place, but that can only prevent so much with aged facilities. And certainly finance is a real challenge in the area of facilities, because we all know those costs continue to increase. In the area of finance, we need to close out on a transportation and food service contract this spring. That has to happen, so we're up and running for the fall. And of course, in the area of finance, I keep coming back to healthcare costs. Our challenges, the word on the street is it doesn't look like we're going to have a state budget settled by June, and it may go longer. It's predicted it will go later even than our toughest year, a year ago. And so what will that look like for us? We have to have contingency plans of how to manage our finances to that end, and we've got to always balance the needs of the district, the needs of our students, against fiscal responsibility. And that's a daily challenge that we face across the district, but particularly falls in the area of our Director of Finance. So if we take the 3-year overview and we say, okay, how about right now? What are our immediate priorities? And I have them listed in each of the areas here. In academics, nailing down our math sequence, implementing the full-day kindergarten that you saw in the early slides that we had just approved, and are implementing our special ed plan. For our students, it's continuing to look at supports for our students, and that support is academic, it's emotional, it's social, it's mental health, it's all aspects of support for our students, and engaging our students, and that means all of our students. It's addressing the diversity issues. Personnel, we have some immediate hires. We have immediate hires because of resignations and sudden retirements, and managing those. A leadership plan as we face the retirement of the Director of Ed Services, and healthcare awareness. Actually had a meeting this morning with a whole plan to market some healthcare awareness with our personnel across the district. In the area of facilities, the Facilities Committee of the Board has been working with the administration to begin to implement that feasibility study through our capital projects plan. And immediate look, we're already receiving bids for summer projects, and I listed those earlier. In the area of finance, our immediate concern, of course, is to balance the 17-18 budget and to continue to work to control those healthcare costs and to address them. And so, in closing, I summarize by saying and repeating what I said in the beginning. In fact, the state of the York Suburban School District is strong. I have every confidence that working together, we can make it stronger. And when I say working together, I mean the board. I mean we have an incredibly supportive community. We have a very talented and committed administrative and teaching staff. If we all work together and we have a clear plan, we will become stronger over time, because we are. Thank you. And finally, I think I'll take one question, if there are any right now, as we transition to Mrs. Mason to come up and do the budget portion of this, and then ask other questions to be held until the end. Are there any questions? Mr. Bulette.
Look for the skyward in compass.
And you know what? I'm going to let Mrs. Mason answer that. It is our it is our finance management system, and so it's our payroll. And I said I'm going to let her answer it, and I answered it. It's our payroll. It's the whole financial management system that we do all of our budgeting through, our purchase orders, and actually do our attendance and that sort of thing.
So we've already paid for that software?
Yes, sir, we have. Good.
Thank you, Councilman. Good evening, everyone.
Okay. Our enrollment for 16-17 was at 2,948. That was as of October 1. All of our enrollment is geared at, I'm sorry, I take that back. Our enrollment was 2,948, yes, as of October 1. I have to get my bearings back here. All of these numbers, 2008-9 through 2015-16, they are actual numbers that were reported at our end of the year report to PDE by ABM. And then our number for this year, as of right now, is now at 3,157. So our January 1 enrollment is up from October, which is typically the way it does happen. So what's our revenue that's driving our, what are we going to look at for revenue for our budget? We're going to look at history, we're going to look at the projected revenues, we're going to look at our revenue sources, and then we're going to look at the factors that are also impacting it for 17-18. Our revenue history from 2009-10 through 2015-16 is where we actually came in when we were audited. Our 2016-17 revenue is our budget number, and our 2017-18 projection number is what we're talking with through this presentation this evening, the $53,450,403. So what makes up that revenue? There are three things that typically make up our revenue. It's local sources, state sources, and federal sources. In our local sources, which for us is our main source, we're looking at 82% of our budget, and of course of that 82%, 87% comes from our real estate. Our real estate, based on the budget we're talking about this evening, is just over $38.5 million.
How much is that again?
I'll give you the exact number, Mr. Sears. It's $38,588,607, and that's without a tax increase. Okay. Our total local sources, and I will show you if there's different slides I show throughout. Our total local sources that we're looking at budgeting right now is a total of $43,987,831. Is out of the $53 million. 43 million is of the local. Our state sources make up 17% of our budget, and that number right now is $0.9 million. The biggest increase coming, the biggest factor coming from our basic ed subsidy, and that totals $2,083,804, and that's with our our Ready to Learn grant being a part of that. The state is now putting that as part of the basic ed subsidy. Our retirement and Social Security are also in that number, and that is retirement is approximately 50% of our expenses, but we get paid behind. We get reimbursed, if you will, behind on that. Then our federal sources actually make up less than 1% of the budget, but when you do diagrams like this, it doesn't recognize anything below 1. So our total of federal sources is $473,789, and it's always Title I, II, and III. Title I being our largest, which is $393,498. We do have another source, which is called Other Sources. Typically, it's in the 9,000 number if you're familiar with looking at reports. But we don't budget anything there because it's typically stuff that we don't plan on. Bond issue, proceeds, refinance, if we do get transfers from other funds, typically would be the food service fund, or if we would sell any of our fixed assets. So we don't budget anything in those numbers. So putting those individual pies all together, if you will, this is what we look like. 16-17, we had 18% in our state sources. For 17-18, we're looking at 17%. Our federal is 1 and 1, and then our local sources, we had 43% $43,103,168 in there for 16-17. We're at $43,987,831 local for 17-18 for the moment, and that's because, if you recall, the state gives a portion for real estate. We don't know that number until May, so to start the budget process, it's local, and then once we get that number, most of you call it the gambling money. Once we know that number, then we do a shift into the state. So essentially, we're going to end up with the same pie, if you will. What's impacting the revenue in 17-18? Very short, because there's really not a lot of changes this year. Our appeals that we've had in the past, they've settled, and our state budget at the moment is settled, so it doesn't affect this. So our local real estate assessed value is just down slightly. And we're maintaining our collection rate of taxes at 96.5. So they're just statements, if you will. Our state sources, our basic ed subsidy and other funding sources, meaning the Ready to Learn grants. We're going to keep them at the 16-17 level using the funding formula that was used. All indicators that we've received so far, our numbers will be the same, if not slightly higher, but we don't get the final indicators from the state until April. So I can't change that number right now, but with what we've gotten from the federal reporting, if you will, our number will be the same. Same goes with the special ed subsidy. We're anticipating that to be the same for 17-18 that it was for 16-17. And in both of those, there's a hold harmless that goes with them, so we're still above that level as well. Our retirement reimbursement, that's going to increase due to employer contribution expense rate increase to 32.57. That increase will be about $334,000 above what it is for 16-17. This is the current PACERS employer contribution rate for us this year. It's, as I said, the 32.57. Interestingly enough, the projection is only going out 5 years. As some of you will recall in the past, we used to see a 10-year projection, 20-year projection. They're keeping it down, and I think they should, because it changes so much from year to year. Our expenditures. We'll look at history, the projected expenditures, and the impacting factors for that as well. Our history from 2009-10 through 2015-16, again, those are audited numbers of how we finished the year out. 16-17 is our budget number, and 17-18 is our projected number. You'll see we've had a slight increase over the past 3 years. So our expenditure by comparison. When we look at 16-17, our support services are relatively the same at 27% for 16-17 and 26% for 17-18. Our biggest shift is in instructional services. If you look at 16-17, we're at 61%. At 17-18, we're looking at 63%. Two factors drive that. That would be our special ed increases, because it has increased with cost, and that falls in the instruction, because if you remember, instruction is all the 1,000 numbers. And then our personnel increases in there as well. If we look at it by object, which is a further breakdown in our benefits, that includes Social Security, retirement, insurance, and tuition reimbursement for credit. Our retirement expense is now at $7.8 million. Our insurance expense is at $4.3 million. If we look at the professional services, most of that is our IU costs. They come in at $3.1 million. Property services is our water and sewer, our repairs and maintenance, and our equipment rental, and our copier and printer leases.
The main thing being in there, the repairs and maintenance, we're looking at $432,000 in there. In the 500 other services, our transportation contracts are in there, and I say contracts because we have some special ed, other LEAs, we use IU, and then we have our own contractor that we use. Our total transportation costs are about $2.1 million. Our VOTEC costs are in there at $884,000. Our charter school expense is also in there, and that's $1.1 million. So those are the big numbers in the 500 other services. In supplies, we're looking at supplies itself are $791,000. Natural gas is in there at $276,000. We have electric in there at $424,000. We also have our textbooks and workbooks in there at $234,000. Then our property and equipment, most of that is our technology stuff. That comes in at about $312,000. That being some infrastructure items, new equipment, hardware equipment, and some tech supplies. And then our 800 category, our interest on our debt is $1.1 million. We also have a budgetary reserve item in there. And then last but not least, our 900 object, that is all the principal for our debt service. So what's impacting our expenditures? As I've mentioned before, our employer retirement rate contribution increase of $808,000, which is mandated by the state due to the rate changing from 30.03% to 32.57%. We've got 5 additional positions in there. We have special ed costs being up $261,000 from this current year, and our debt service is up $100,000 this year, but it falls back to our current 16-17 level in 18-19. So right now, our revenue to expenditure comparison is $2.2 million. That's quite a gap we're going to work on closing. This is the real estate increase chart. Right now, our assessed value comes in at $1.7 billion. With our millage rate, our tax levy approximately generated by mills is $39.9 million. With the amount of tax relief for the homestead exclusion, that money this year is $663,799. And if you subtract that from the tax levy generated by the mills and multiply it by our collection rate of 96.5, you're looking at approximately $37.9 million available in tax money for 17-18. Looking at what our tax assessed value is today, and today meaning the last report I got, our average residential property is about $155,828, and the average annual residential property tax bill is about $3,493. So what I've done down here is I've taken the gap of the 2.2 and taken our current millage and given you the 17-18 millage increase, what that might look like. 2.5, the reason that's highlighted is because that's what the index is for our district. But the blue line is the county average index because everyone else in the county, their index gets adjusted. So if we look at our average residential property at the current tax rate, and if we would take it through 17-18 at the 2.5, the additional increase would be, or the annual increase would be $87 from 16-17 to 17. And then there's other examples there, but I took 155 since that's our average. So funding the budget for 17-18, what's under review for the administration? We're looking at transportation. We're looking at transportation under our current contracts. What can we do with our vans, buses, combination, bring in-house, do with other contractors. We're looking at supplies, charter and cyber school tuition, can we bring more children back? Our staffing based on retirements, resignations, what are we looking at there, and our contracted services. Options for consideration by the board: increase revenue up to the index, which would take the bid up to $964,715. Consider applying retirement exception, use of assigned retirement fund balance, use of unassigned fund balance, use of insurance trust fund balance, use of capital reserve fund transfer, or any combination of the above. Again, these are all preliminary numbers. We will continue to work on these to bring the gap down, which means all of the things that the board look at will constantly change. This is the millage history over the district since 2005-06. County millage comparison for 16-17. And then the millage history for the county. The administration will continue to look at controlled spending for 16-17, as well as refining what we've already what's already been submitted for 17-18. I will be scheduling meetings with the administration, and we're going to be targeting areas that we want to look at. Manage personnel, again, continue to examine for each resignation and retirement to determine the needs of the district and what's best for the students. Seek alternative funding sources. We're constantly getting emails about grants that are available for specific areas. Identify potential savings. We're looking at charter cyber school reduction, transportation, and special ed. Actively monitoring progress on the state budget. I'm getting emails already about different bills that are going to be coming up, and as Dr. Merkel mentioned earlier, we're already getting some heads up that it could be a rough start to the school year, not having the state budget adopted, and we'll continue to present recommendations to the board. The next steps required of the board are at our next meeting. That's the deadline for the adoption of the opt-out resolution. February 13th is the deadline to adopt preliminary budget on the PDE form. February, March, consider administrative recommendations to balance the proposed 17-18 budget, and April is review the proposed final budget for May adoption.
Questions for either, both? They can be intertwined. Comments, thoughts? Mr. Bulett.
What happened to the $513,000 refund on land contract?
Refund? You mean the reimbursement that we didn't get for 15-16?
I've got a newspaper. I call it a windfall. Just the present term.
No, it's not. That money was actually budgeted for us to receive in 15-16, and we did not receive it. The state didn't put a line item in, so they had to borrow to get it to us. We just received it, and it was not budgeted as revenue for this year, so it's currently just going to fall through.
Taxpayers reimbursed you in effect during those years. The state did not use it.
And we reduced program. And we reduced program, actually more personnel than program, to accommodate that. So had we had we had that reimbursement, we would not have reduced the staff as we did. Other questions? Thank you for saying that. Yes, I should share that with everybody. The slides will all be on the website, as well as an oral presentation of them in some way, shape, or form. And so you can look for them there. You can certainly, as you digest this, you got a lot of numbers, particularly in the budget area. There was a lot of bullets in my half of the presentation. I should say 2/3 of the presentation. And as you digest all that, feel free to email us with questions, concerns, comments. Your feedback is important to us. We don't have a big community tonight, but I'm banking on the fact that everybody's waiting for it to be on the website. They're going to be focusing on it then. But really, the input from you is important to us. So thank you for being here. Be in touch, and you're welcome to stay for the board meeting.